Why Michael's closest friends couldn't believe what they were seeing. For most actors, receiving praise from critics is considered the highest compliment. But for Jaafar Jackson, the opinions that truly mattered came from a much smaller group. The people who had known Michael Jackson personally, not through television interviews, not through concerts, but through real friendships that existed long before the cameras arrived. These were people who had seen Michael at his happiest, his funniest. And even during his most difficult moments, if anyone could recognize whether Jaafar had captured Michael's true personality, it was them. One of those people was Macaulay Culkin. Their friendship began when Macaulay was one of Hollywood's biggest child stars. Over the years, Michael became someone he trusted deeply. Despite decades of public attention surrounding that friendship, Macaulay has rarely spoken about Michael without choosing his words carefully, which made his reaction to the biopic even more significant. According to the transcript, after attending a screening, a reporter asked Macaulay what he thought of Jaafar's performance. For a brief moment, he simply stood there, thinking, searching for the right words. Then he quietly answered, "I forgot I was watching Jaafar." He explained that it had never happened before, not with any other actor, not with any previous biographical film. For those few moments, he had completely forgotten he was watching someone portray Michael Jackson. That reaction quickly spread among fans, because it wasn't describing impressive makeup or convincing choreography. It was describing something much harder to achieve: believability. The kind that makes an audience stop analyzing a performance and simply experience it. Another person whose opinion carried enormous weight was Usher. Long before becoming one of music's biggest stars, Usher openly admitted that Michael Jackson had inspired nearly every aspect of his career. He studied Michael's performances, his stage presence, his ability to connect emotionally with an audience. Whenever people asked whether anyone could ever fill Michael's shoes, Usher always gave the same answer: no one could. But according to the transcript, that answer appeared to change after he watched Jaafar perform. Following an early screening, Usher shared only 3 simple words on social media: "I believe now." The message was remarkably short, yet it spread across social media within hours. Fans immediately understood its meaning. If someone as deeply influenced by Michael as Usher believed Jaafar had accomplished the impossible, others began looking at the film differently as well. These reactions revealed something important. People weren't praising Jaafar because he was Michael's nephew. They were responding to what they believed they had witnessed on screen, a performance that reached beyond physical resemblance, one that reminded them of someone they had loved, worked beside, and admired for decades. As more stories quietly emerged from private screenings, Hollywood's curiosity continued growing. Some celebrities left smiling, others remained unusually quiet. Several admitted they needed time to process what they had just seen. But among all those emotional reactions, one response stood apart from the rest. Because the next person to watch Jaafar perform didn't simply become emotional, he reportedly walked away completely overwhelmed. And what Chris Tucker said afterward would become one of the most unforgettable stories surrounding the entire production. Usher, Beyoncé, and the artists who changed their minds. Long before Jaafar Jackson stepped onto the set, some of today's biggest music stars had already reached the same conclusion. No one could ever replace Michael Jackson. Not because there weren't talented performers, but because Michael represented something that appeared impossible to recreate. His voice, his charisma, his stage presence, his ability to captivate millions with the smallest movement. It wasn't something artists believed could be learned. It was something they believed only Michael possessed. Among those artists was Usher. Throughout his career, he never hid the influence Michael had on his life. As a young performer, he studied Michael's concerts frame by frame. He admired his discipline, his precision, his relentless pursuit of perfection. Whenever interviewers asked whether another artist could ever fill Michael's shoes, Usher's answer was always the same: no. According to the transcript, that opinion changed after he attended an early screening of the biopic. Instead of writing a lengthy review, Usher posted only 3 words on social media: "I believe now." The message immediately captured attention. Fans understood that those words weren't casual praise. They came from someone who had spent his entire career measuring greatness against the standard Michael Jackson had established. If Usher believed, people began wondering what he had witnessed inside that theater. But he wasn't the only artist left speechless. Beyoncé's admiration for Michael Jackson has never been a secret. She has repeatedly described him as one of the greatest influences on her career. From childhood, she studied his performances, his creativity, his ability to transform music into visual storytelling. Many of the production techniques seen in modern pop concerts trace their inspiration back to Michael's groundbreaking performances. According to the transcript, when footage of Jaafar performing Smooth Criminal became available, Beyoncé's creative team watched the sequence over and over again. No one interrupted. No one offered immediate opinions. They simply watched in complete silence. When the scene finally ended, one comment reportedly summarized what everyone in the room had been thinking: He's not imitating, he's inheriting. That observation carried remarkable meaning. Imitation can be learned. Inheritance suggests something much deeper. It implies understanding, connection, and respect for a legacy that extends beyond performance alone. For artists who had spent years inspired by Michael, that distinction mattered enormously, because they weren't searching for another impersonator, they were searching for authenticity, someone capable of honoring Michael's legacy without reducing it to simple imitation. As more respected performers quietly shared their reactions, the conversation surrounding the film continued evolving. People were no longer asking whether Jaafar resembled Michael. Instead, they began asking whether he had somehow captured the qualities that made Michael unlike anyone else. The expectations surrounding the biopic continued rising, but perhaps the most emotional response had yet to come, because one of Michael's closest friends, a man who shared countless unforgettable moments with him away from the spotlight, would experience something so overwhelming that he reportedly had to walk away before he could even finish processing what he had seen. And when Chris Tucker finally spoke, his words would become one of the most unforgettable compliments Jaafar Jackson would ever receive. His voice, his charisma, his stage presence, his ability to captivate millions with the smallest movement. It wasn't something artists believed could be learned. It was something they believed only Michael possessed. Among those artists was Usher. Throughout his career, he never hid the influence Michael had on his life. As a young performer, he studied Michael's concerts frame by frame. He admired his discipline, his precision, his relentless pursuit of perfection. Whenever interviewers asked whether another artist could ever fill Michael's shoes, Usher's answer was always the same: no. According to the transcript, that opinion changed after he attended an early screening of the biopic. Instead of writing a lengthy review, Usher posted only 3 words on social media: "I believe now." The message immediately captured attention. Fans understood that those words weren't casual praise. They came from someone who had spent his entire career measuring greatness against the standard Michael Jackson had established. If Usher believed, people began wondering what he had witnessed inside that theater. But he wasn't the only artist left speechless. Beyoncé's admiration for Michael Jackson has never been a secret. She has repeatedly described him as one of the greatest influences on her career. From childhood, she studied his performances, his creativity, his ability to transform music into visual storytelling. Many of the production techniques seen in modern pop concerts trace their inspiration back to Michael's groundbreaking performances. According to the transcript, when footage of Jaafar performing Smooth Criminal became available, Beyoncé's creative team watched the sequence over and over again. No one interrupted. No one offered immediate opinions. They simply watched in complete silence. When the scene finally ended, one comment reportedly summarized what everyone in the room had been thinking: "He's not imitating, he's inheriting." That observation carried remarkable meaning. Imitation can be learned. Inheritance suggests something much deeper. It implies understanding, connection, and respect for a legacy that extends beyond performance alone. For artists who had spent years inspired by Michael, that distinction mattered enormously, because they weren't searching for another impersonator. They were searching for authenticity, someone capable of honoring Michael's legacy without reducing it to simple imitation. As more respected performers quietly shared their reactions, the conversation surrounding the film continued evolving. People were no longer asking whether Jaafar resembled Michael. Instead, they began asking whether he had somehow captured the qualities that made Michael unlike anyone else. The expectations surrounding the biopic continued rising, but perhaps the most emotional response had yet to come, because one of Michael's closest friends, a man who shared countless unforgettable moments with him away from the spotlight, would experience something so overwhelming that he reportedly had to walk away before he could even finish processing what he had seen. And when Chris Tucker finally spoke, his words would become one of the most unforgettable compliments Jaafar Jackson would ever receive. Some friendships in Hollywood exist only in front of the cameras. Others continue long after the spotlight fades. Michael Jackson and Chris Tucker shared the second kind. They laughed together, traveled together, watched movies together, and built a friendship that remained remarkably genuine despite the extraordinary lives they lived. Chris never described Michael as simply the biggest entertainer on earth. He described him as a friend. Over the years, Chris often shared lighthearted stories that revealed a side of Michael the public rarely saw: the playful prankster, the shy man who disguised himself just to enjoy an evening at the movies, the loyal friend who would call simply to ask how someone was doing. According to the transcript, Chris remembered how difficult it was for Michael to experience ordinary life. If they wanted to watch a movie, Michael would arrive only after the lights went down, wearing disguises so no one would recognize him. Even then, Chris recalled turning around in the theater, only to hear Michael quietly whisper, "Hey, Chris." Moments like those reminded everyone that behind the global fame, there was still someone searching for simple moments of normal life. Because of that friendship, Chris Tucker approached the biopic differently than most people. He wasn't simply watching an actor portray Michael Jackson. He was watching someone recreate memories that had once belonged only to him. According to the transcript, what happened during the screening surprised everyone involved. As Jaafar's performance continued, Chris reportedly became increasingly emotional. Eventually, he stood up, not because he disliked what he was seeing, but because it had become almost too real. He quietly stepped outside, unable to continue watching for the moment. Those nearby later recalled that Chris remained away from the screening for several minutes. When he finally returned, he walked directly toward Jaafar. Without hesitation, he embraced him. Then he delivered words that would quickly become one of the most memorable reactions surrounding the entire film. According to the transcript, Chris told him, "You scared me, because I believed you were him." It wasn't criticism. It wasn't exaggeration. It was the reaction of someone who had spent years beside Michael Jackson, someone who suddenly found himself emotionally transported back to those memories. For Jaafar, there could hardly have been a greater compliment. Actors often hope audiences believe their performances, but earning that kind of response from one of Michael's closest friends was something entirely different. It suggested that the performance had reached beyond technical skill, beyond choreography, beyond appearance. It had touched something deeply personal. As stories like Chris Tucker's quietly spread throughout Hollywood, the excitement surrounding the biopic continued to grow. People were no longer discussing whether Jaafar looked convincing. They were discussing how his performance made people feel, and perhaps no reaction would prove more emotional than the one still to come. Because the next response would reportedly come from someone who had shared an entire lifetime with Michael Jackson, his sister, Janet Jackson. What happened after she watched the film would remain private for some time. But when details finally began to emerge, they revealed one of the most heartfelt moments connected to the entire production. For millions of fans around the world, Michael Jackson was the king of pop. But to Janet Jackson, he was simply her brother. She had witnessed his journey from the very beginning. She remembered the rehearsals before the fame, the long hours spent perfecting every performance, the sacrifices few people ever saw. She understood Michael in ways that almost no one else could, which meant there was perhaps no audience more difficult to impress. Anyone could recognize Michael's signature dance moves. Anyone could imitate the famous costumes. But Janet knew the small details, the subtle expressions, the quiet smile, the way Michael carried himself when no cameras were around. Those were the things no acting coach could easily teach. According to the transcript, when Janet was given the opportunity to see early footage from the biopic, those present noticed that she remained remarkably quiet throughout the screening. She watched every scene carefully, rarely looking away from the screen. She offered almost no immediate reaction, no applause, no dramatic comments, only silence. For many people in the room, that silence became impossible to read. Did she approve? Was she disappointed? Or was she simply overwhelmed by the experience of seeing someone bring her brother back to life? According to the transcript, after the screening ended, Janet quietly approached Jaafar. Rather than making a public statement, she chose to speak with him privately. Those nearby later recalled that the conversation remained brief, but deeply emotional. No cameras recorded the moment, no microphones captured every word. And perhaps that was exactly how Janet wanted it. Some memories are simply too personal to be shared with the world. Family has always been central to the Jackson story. Through decades of success, extraordinary achievements, and unimaginable public attention, the bond between the Jackson siblings remained something they protected fiercely. For Janet, watching Jaafar portray Michael wasn't simply watching a film. It meant revisiting memories that stretched back to childhood. The rehearsals, the family performances, the private conversations, the laughter that audiences never witnessed. According to the transcript, people close to the production later suggested that Janet's greatest compliment wasn't delivered during the screening itself, but afterward, when she quietly expressed how proud she believed Michael would have been to see Jaafar honoring the family's legacy with such dedication. Whether spoken publicly or privately, those words carried enormous meaning because they came from someone who had spent an entire lifetime beside the man being portrayed. As stories from the screenings continued spreading through Hollywood, a pattern began emerging. Diana Ross had been deeply moved. Chris Tucker struggled to hold back emotion. Usher admitted he had changed his mind. Now Janet Jackson had reportedly offered one of the most personal reactions of all. One after another, the people who knew Michael best seemed to reach remarkably similar conclusions. This wasn't simply another actor wearing famous costumes. There was something about Jaafar's performance that felt unexpectedly genuine, but one question still remained unanswered. How had he managed to convince so many people who had spent years beside Michael Jackson? The answer wasn't found in the makeup, or the choreography, or even the remarkable resemblance. It was hidden in months of preparation, relentless discipline, and an extraordinary commitment to understanding the man behind the legend. That journey would reveal why so many people believed Jaafar Jackson's performance felt astonishingly real. When audiences first saw Jaafar Jackson on screen, many assumed the transformation was the result of Hollywood makeup, advanced visual effects, perfect lighting, and carefully designed costumes. Those elements certainly played an important role. But according to the people working on the film, the real transformation began long before the cameras ever started recording. Because Jaafar understood something essential. Looking like Michael Jackson wasn't enough. He had to understand how Michael thought, how he moved, and how he communicated without saying a single word. According to the transcript, Jaafar devoted months to studying Michael's life in extraordinary detail. He watched concert footage repeatedly, he analyzed rehearsals, he listened to interviews. He even paid close attention to the quiet moments between performances, when Michael wasn't entertaining an audience, but simply being himself. Every gesture mattered. The way Michael lowered his head before stepping onto a stage, the gentle smile that often appeared when speaking to children, the calm way he greeted people behind the scenes, the subtle movements of his hands while listening during conversations. These weren't details that fans usually noticed, but they were the details the people closest to Michael remembered most clearly. Jaafar reportedly wanted to capture those moments just as accurately as the famous dance routines, because those small moments revealed the real person behind the legend. According to the transcript, the filmmakers also encouraged him to avoid becoming an impersonator. Instead of copying every movement exactly, they wanted him to understand why Michael moved the way he did, why he paused before speaking, why he performed with such precision, why every expression carried genuine emotion rather than simple choreography. That approach changed everything. Impersonation focuses on appearance, performance focuses on understanding, and understanding creates authenticity. As filming continued, crew members reportedly began noticing unusual moments between takes. Sometimes when Jaafar walked across the set, people instinctively turned toward him, believing for just a split second that Michael himself had entered the room. Not because they had forgotten reality, but because the body language felt astonishingly familiar. The posture, the quiet confidence, the graceful movements. It all reminded them of someone they had spent years watching. According to the transcript, several members of the production admitted there were moments when the resemblance became almost unsettling, not because of makeup, but because Jaafar had successfully captured Michael's natural rhythm and presence. Perhaps that explains why so many emotional reactions came from people who had actually known Michael. They weren't responding to visual effects. They were recognizing behaviors they remembered from real life, things that could never be recreated through costumes alone. As more footage reached private audiences, one conclusion appeared again and again. Jaafar hadn't approached the role as someone trying to become famous. He approached it as someone carrying an enormous responsibility to honor his uncle, to respect his family's history, and to introduce Michael Jackson's story to an entirely new generation. But with that responsibility came extraordinary pressure. Every scene would be compared, every dance move analyzed, every expression judged by millions of people around the world. And in the next chapter, the world would discover what it was really like to carry the weight of portraying the most famous entertainer in history. Because becoming Michael Jackson on screen turned out to be one of the greatest challenges any actor had ever faced. Long before audiences would finally see the finished film, Jaafar Jackson was already carrying a responsibility unlike anything most actors ever experience. This wasn't just another leading role. It wasn't simply another Hollywood production. He had been asked to portray the most recognizable entertainer in modern history, a man whose voice, dance moves, expressions, and personality were known by billions of people around the world. Every scene would be analyzed, every movement compared, every performance measured against decades of unforgettable memories. For most actors, the pressure comes from critics. For Jaafar, the pressure came from the entire world. According to the transcript, everyone involved with the production understood that audiences wouldn't accept an ordinary performance. They expected authenticity, they expected emotion, and above all, they expected respect for Michael Jackson's extraordinary legacy. That expectation influenced every stage of filming. Some scenes reportedly required multiple takes, not because they were technically incorrect, but because the smallest detail didn't yet feel completely right. The angle of Michael's head, the timing of a smile, the rhythm of his walk, even the quiet moments between dialogue received the same careful attention as the major dance performances. Those tiny details often became the hardest to master because they couldn't simply be choreographed. They had to feel natural. According to the transcript, director Antoine Fuqua repeatedly encouraged Jaafar to stop thinking like an actor and start thinking like Michael, instead of asking, "How should I perform this scene?" He was encouraged to ask, "How would Michael have experienced this moment?" That subtle change transformed the entire performance. It shifted the focus away from imitation toward understanding. As filming progressed, people working behind the camera reportedly noticed something unusual. Between takes, when Jaafar remained in character, the atmosphere on set often became unexpectedly emotional. Crew members who had worked with Michael years earlier occasionally found themselves watching in silence, Not because they had forgotten it was a movie, but because certain moments felt remarkably familiar. The posture, the calm confidence, the gentle way he acknowledged people around him. Those qualities reminded them of someone they had once known personally. According to the transcript, several members of the production admitted that there were moments when simply watching Jaafar walk across the set gave them chills because the resemblance extended beyond appearance into behavior and presence. But despite those encouraging reactions, the pressure never disappeared. Every day of filming carried the same question. Would audiences believe what they were seeing? Would lifelong Michael Jackson fans accept the performance? Or would the weight of such an iconic legacy prove impossible for anyone to carry? Those questions stayed with Jaafar until filming finally came to an end. Only then did another realization begin to emerge. This film wasn't simply introducing Jaafar Jackson to the world. It was introducing Michael Jackson's story to an entirely new generation, many of whom had never experienced his career firsthand. That responsibility made every scene even more meaningful because, for countless young viewers, this biopic would become their first introduction to the man behind the legend. And as anticipation continued growing around the world, another remarkable transformation quietly began taking place. The conversation was no longer focused only on the film itself. People had started talking about Michael Jackson again, his music, his performances, his influence, his legacy. In many ways, before the movie had even reached theaters, it was already bringing Michael Jackson back into the global conversation. For years, whenever Hollywood announced another music biopic, audiences responded with cautious optimism. Some films exceeded expectations, while others struggled to capture the spirit of the artists they portrayed. As a result, many fans approached every new announcement with the same question. Can any actor truly bring a legendary performer back to life? When the Michael Jackson biopic was first revealed, skepticism was stronger than ever. Many people believed the role simply couldn't be done. Michael wasn't just another famous singer, he was a once-in-a-generation performer whose influence reached every corner of the entertainment industry. His concerts became global events. His music videos changed filmmaking forever. His style influenced fashion. His choreography inspired countless artists. Trying to recreate someone like that seemed almost impossible. According to the transcript, the early footage released by the production began changing that perception almost immediately. Fans who had initially questioned the casting found themselves reacting very differently after seeing Jaafar's performance. Many admitted they had expected imitation, but instead saw something that felt surprisingly authentic. Social media quickly filled with comparisons, not between Jaafar and other actors, but between Jaafar and Michael himself. People examined side-by-side clips. They compared dance movements, facial expressions, stage presence. Even the smallest gestures became topics of discussion. Normally, that level of comparison creates criticism. This time, it created curiosity. As more footage appeared, the conversation gradually shifted. People stopped asking, "Does he look like Michael?" Instead, they began asking, "How did he manage to capture him so accurately?" That subtle change reflected something much larger. Public expectations were evolving. The biopic was no longer viewed as a risky Hollywood experiment. It was beginning to look like one of the most anticipated music films in recent memory. According to the transcript, industry insiders also noted that the overwhelmingly positive reactions from people who had personally known Michael gave many fans additional confidence in the project. For longtime admirers, those endorsements carried enormous significance. If Michael's closest friends, family members, and fellow artists believed the performance honored his legacy, many fans felt more willing to embrace the film themselves. At the same time, a new generation began discovering Michael Jackson in an entirely different way. Some younger viewers had never experienced the excitement of his world tours. They hadn't watched the premieres of Thriller, Bad, or Black or White. They knew Michael only through streaming platforms, short video clips, and stories told by previous generations. For them, the biopic represented more than entertainment. It became an introduction, a chance to understand why millions of people still consider Michael Jackson one of the greatest performers who ever lived. According to the transcript, the production team hoped the film would celebrate not only Michael's remarkable career, but also his creativity, his dedication, and the artistic vision that transformed modern music and performance. Perhaps that's why excitement surrounding the film continued growing with every new trailer. It wasn't simply promising another biography. It was inviting audiences to experience one of entertainment's most extraordinary stories through a new perspective. A perspective shaped by someone who had grown up carrying the Jackson name, someone who understood the responsibility better than almost anyone else. As release day moved closer, one final question remained. Would this film simply become another successful Hollywood biopic? Or would it accomplish something much greater? Could it inspire an entirely new generation to appreciate Michael Jackson's genius while reminding longtime fans why his legacy has endured for decades? That answer was now only one chapter away. Because the story of Jaafar Jackson was never just about becoming Michael, it It was about protecting a legacy, honoring a family, and ensuring that one of the greatest entertainers in history would continue inspiring the world for generations to come. When audiences finally take their seats to watch the Michael Jackson biopic, most will arrive expecting to see one of the greatest entertainers in history brought back to life. They'll expect the music, the legendary dance routines, the unforgettable costumes, the iconic performances that shaped popular culture. But by the time the credits begin to roll, many may realize the film is about something much deeper. It's about legacy. Because Michael Jackson's influence has never been limited to record sales or world tours. His creativity transformed music videos into cinematic experiences. His performances raised the standard for live entertainment. His vision inspired generations of singers, dancers, directors, fashion designers, and performers around the world. Even decades later, his impact can still be seen across nearly every corner of the entertainment industry. According to the transcript, the filmmakers never intended for the project to be a simple recreation of Michael's career. Their goal was to tell the story of the artist, the visionary, and the human being whose work continues to influence millions of people across the globe. For Jaafar Jackson, that responsibility extended far beyond learning choreography or memorizing dialogue. He wasn't simply accepting the biggest role of his career, he was accepting the responsibility of protecting one of the most important legacies in music history. Every rehearsal, every performance, every scene carried the weight of extraordinary expectations, not because audiences demanded perfection, but because Michael's legacy deserved nothing less than complete respect. Throughout this journey, one theme appeared again and again: authenticity. The people who knew Michael personally didn't praise Jaafar because he shared the Jackson name. They praised him because they believed he approached the role with sincerity, discipline, and genuine admiration for the man he was portraying. According to the transcript, those closest to the production repeatedly emphasized that Jaafar never tried to replace Michael. Instead, he focused on honoring him in the most respectful way possible. Perhaps that's the greatest compliment any actor could ever receive. Not that audiences forgot Michael Jackson, but that they were reminded why he meant so much to the world in the first place. As excitement surrounding the film continued to grow, many longtime fans found themselves returning to Michael's original performances, his concerts, his interviews, his music videos. A new generation also began discovering his extraordinary career for the very first time. In many ways, the biopic had already achieved something remarkable before its official release. It had brought millions of people back to Michael Jackson's music, his artistry, and his unforgettable legacy. That may ultimately become the film's greatest achievement, not simply introducing Jaafar Jackson as a talented actor, but inspiring people to celebrate one of history's greatest entertainers once again, because true legends never disappear. Their influence continues through the artists they inspire, the music they leave behind, and the generations who keep their stories alive. Michael Jackson changed the world through imagination, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Now, a new chapter is preparing to introduce that story to millions of people all over again. Whether audiences leave the theater talking about Jaafar's remarkable performance, or remembering Michael's extraordinary life, one thing seems certain: the King of Pop's legacy continues to live on, not only through his music, but through every person inspired to carry his story into the future. And perhaps that is the greatest tribute of all. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary. Until next time, thank you for watching.